You can use the sun indoors as well. You just have to be next to sunlight, which is usually next to a window. The sun was just coming through perfectly. Like, I really liked the way it looked. Heyo, welcome to this fresh new backdrop angle in my office. This was a pain to set up, but so far it's been really cool to have. Today we kind of have a subscriber request. There was a comment asking for advice on how to be more consistent with photography because they want to take more pictures, but they hardly have time. I'm sure they're not the only ones that have that problem. After reading this, I felt inspired in general to create something, but also inspired just to answer the question. I did type out a quick reply, and I mentioned that I'll do a longer answer with a video. This is the video. So I came up with these 8 tips in being more consistent in photography. Even though I specialize in toy photography, these can be applied to other forms of photography and even beyond photography, kind of. So tip number 1, take portraits. So don't worry about making an epic scene with over 20 figures. Don't even worry about more than 2 figures. In fact, just use 1 figure. Start off with either your favorite character or your favorite figure. Put them in either a cool pose or just having it stand straight up. There will be other opportunities later on to do more epic battle pics. But for now, while we're trying to be more consistent and maybe learn, just use 1 figure. For most of these tips, I believe if you start small and simple, you will get better, you will become more efficient, and lead you wanting to expand and become more creative. Number 2, don't worry about a fancy background or diorama. Some of the most popular toy photos I've seen are just with the figure and a solid color background. So whether you have a paper backdrop already set up, or you just have your favorite color poster board, put your subject down and take a picture. So kind of within that tip is our 3rd tip, which has to do with lens choice. And that's using a longer lens. By longer, I would suggest like 50 millimeters and up, because the longer your focal length is, the smaller your background needs to be. So you don't have to worry too much about the size of your background, although you do have to have the space in your area because you need to be a certain distance in order to focus with the longer lens. You can see here, I have this huge backdrop set up, so I could have a wide lens or a telephoto lens and it still works. But if I just have this small board set up, using a tighter lens compresses that background so it doesn't need to be huge. You might need more space because you do have your camera and lens a little farther back to capture your subject in the frame. Remember, this applies to all photos and backgrounds, so if you do get into more dioramas, a tighter lens might help you as well. And just a side note, I'm not saying only use a 50 millimeter up for toy photography. No, the tip is that it just makes it easier because you don't have to worry about the size of your background as much. And I have some shots that I've done with 24 millimeters, 35 millimeters. So still talking about backgrounds is tip number 4. Use the same background more than once. Whether you are using a single colored backdrop or you have this beautifully crafted diorama, don't just set it up, take the picture, and then the next shot you're doing something else. Use that diorama or background more than once. I know when I was really on fire, my goal was 1 picture a day, and so I would set up different dioramas and kind of use that at least for a few days before moving on. If you have time, maybe you could do like here's 1 picture, here's another picture, here's another picture, like all right back to back to back on that same background diorama. That's already multiple shots that you just did. And even if it's with the same figure, you can do different poses. Or if it is a diorama that you have set up, you can do the same figure, different poses, or even same figure, same poses, but maybe you have a different angle. Like, maybe you're shooting from the top down, maybe from the bottom up. Maybe just straight on, maybe you turn him a little bit and now you're shooting to the side. This is where you can be creative, like start straight on, start small, but then you're kind of adding on like, hey, I can do this, I can do that. Maybe trying a different lens. The tip is just use the same background so you don't have to worry about changing the background so much. I know that is a big reason why people don't want to shoot is because like they don't have dioramas to work with or anything like that. But if you do get one, or you don't have one and you're just using a backdrop, use it multiple times. Even doing like a series with a specific background. Like I've done a portrait series before with just the clean backdrop or just like black in the background. Like, you can line it up to where it's different figures you want to show off and it's a fancy portrait series. And with my Spider-Man series recently, I've been using this diorama for all the shots. I'm turning it to get slightly different angles, as well as positioning my camera and lighting differently. I mentioned lighting! Number 5 has to do with lighting. Just use one light. I feel like lighting is another factor that can be intimidating to some people. And even though it is one of the most important things in photography, it doesn't have to be difficult. Once again, keeping it simple, you don't have to overthink which lights you're gonna use, what colors should you use. Just pick one light and just use that. You can set it up however you like. And I mean, this is where I've said before, like, you know, you can experiment to see where the light is, what looks good, what are you going for, but just move it around. Move it, take a picture, move it, take a picture, see what you like. And then when you do get it, like use the same backdrop, use the same light, change the figure around, boom, like you have a good setup. And if it is difficult and you're unsure of where to place the lights and you are asking me like, I just need one setup, Matt, what can I do? My favorite setup for toy photography is placing the light behind your subject. So that's gonna give us the nice rim light. And then you're placing a piece of paper, cardboard, I mean, preferably white poster board. You're placing that opposite your backlights in front of your subject. So with one light, you have the rim light from behind, and then you have it bouncing, lighting up the front of your subject. And it's gonna be a nice soft light in the front, which also kind of helps with that like plastic shiny look, depending on what figure you're using. And if you're not sure if it's reflecting, you should be able to tell, like if you move your paper up and down, like you'll see that white light on your subject in the front. And if you don't see it, then it's probably not angled right or it's not close enough, but you just gotta experiment and see. And so if you're still looking at me like, well, I don't even know what light to use, honestly, you can use any light as far as like a lamp goes, or I mean, if you do have a small LED light, like there's a ton of different brands out there that make these and they're not expensive. But if you still don't have any of those, or you don't like any lamps to use or light bulbs, whatever, then that's where our next tip comes in. Number 6, use the sun. So I don't want to limit this to saying you have to go outside to use the sun, even though that is a really good tip, and that's where I've gotten some of my favorite shots. You can use the sun indoors as well. You just have to be next to sunlight, which is usually next to a window. And so even recently I was kind of surprised with the sunlight in my office when I had this spider punk shot set up, and I was ready to light it up, but then I had to go do something, and when I came back, the sun was just coming through perfectly and it just lit the whole scene up. And so I did place this bounce board to kind of bounce that light, but that's all I had for this scene, and like I really liked the way it looked. So find a space you can work with that has a window, and because the sun moves, it might not work all the time. Like you have to find the times where the sun is shining the best and just figure it out. On to tip number 7. Keep editing simple. Editing can be crazy and more time consuming than the actual setup and shot. One way could be to not use the RAW format and just shoot in JPEG on your camera, because that already gives you like normal colors to work with or to look at, and kind of on your phone, that's how it's set up. I'm not fully gonna say don't shoot RAW, even though that is like a suggestion that could help go faster and help you be more consistent, but I still highly recommend shooting in RAW because it does just give you the flexibility. So even when it comes to setting up lighting and things, sometimes you can not be perfect, but you can kind of fix it with some settings that you adjust. So with that, whether shooting in RAW or JPEG, like you do edit and tweak the colors and the lighting a little bit on your computer or your phone, save those settings. Like you should be able to save it as like a preset, and then you can just like copy paste or just apply the preset to your next photo, and boom, all those settings are the same. And if you had the same diorama lighting setup, all the settings should be the same. So just copy, paste, boom, boom. And even if it's a complex shot later on, you know, you're adjusting certain colors, like save your settings so that way you can apply this basic like foundation edit to your photo, and then you can move on and edit and tweak things like more intense, adding effects and all that. And for my last tip, tip number 8, it might be my favorite tip, is just to have fun. If you're watching this and you do other kinds of photography that might be like for business or for other people or portraits or whatever, I would still suggest to have fun because it should be fun. But especially with toy photography, like whether you're a collector or a photographer first, like you like these toys, like you have these toys or you bought these toys because like you like them. It should be something that like you want to shoot and be creative with. And one cool thing about toys is that they don't talk back, or they shouldn't talk back to you. They're not gonna complain about the photo shoot taking too long, or that the light is too bright, or they aren't getting paid enough. It's all just you. And I know for me, like growing up as a kid, I remember always having creative ideas and wanting to create scenes. And I tried like learning to draw, but I never got it down. I never learned how to draw well enough to create scenes and get ideas from my head down to paper. When I did discover toy photography, it opened up that creativity so much in me, and now I can create scenes and make things that I do have in my head that I want to like build and just create. And I do really love doing this. And when it comes to social media and you're posting wherever, it is nice to get likes and comments and shares and follows, but ultimately, like it shouldn't be about that. Like it should be about you having fun and just trying to be creative. Some of my favorite pics that I remember like being super proud of with the lighting and the editing and posting them, like they hardly got any likes. But did that take away from like all the joy and like effort that I put into the picture? Absolutely not. And like I'm proud of it. Like I have some printed pictures that I like that aren't that's my top liked photos or whatever. So it shouldn't be about that. It should be about, you know, the process and your joy, you know, shooting what you like. A bonus tip with having fun is like don't blame the algorithm if you're posting. Take pics when you want to or when you can. Get better at lighting and editing and just enjoy the process. And so as a closing note, all these tips don't have to be like you have to do all of them all at once. And this is gonna create, and this is gonna give you the best image. Like maybe you just grab one of them, maybe you just focus on a few of them and just try it. So after doing just a few standing portraits, like you're gonna wanna add more figures, add more lights, add more effects and colors, add more props and dioramas. And then maybe you don't know what else left to do, or you're not sure how to take the next step. Well, that's why I'm here for you. I'm not the best at anything, but I do love teaching and I do love helping. So let me know if you have any questions to create and inspire.